The border wall has been at the center of America's immigration debate ever since Donald Trump made it the centerpiece of his 2016 presidential campaign.
We're going to build a wall. It's going to be built.
But there's another border wall, a virtual wall, and it's received much less attention. It's a mass network of nearly 300 surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and military-grade drones, all spread across the border. They're very hard to find and aren't always in the places you'd expect. Sure, there are several cameras right next to the border in San Isidro, but there are also surveillance towers in residential neighborhoods and public parks. There's one in a community college, and even one near the Del Mar Dog Beach, 32 miles north of the actual border. Until a month ago, the exact location of these towers was a complete mystery. The Department of Homeland Security had not publicly disclosed this information.
But nobody really had a good sense of where these towers were.
Dave Moss is the Director of Investigations at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He spent months mapping them out, and the result is the most comprehensive map of surveillance infrastructure along the US-Mexico border. Moss says that the scope of this technology raises serious privacy concerns.
In the imagination of people in DC and in people in the national media, the border is just this desert wasteland. And then the only people you would ever encounter out along the border are human traffickers and cartels and smugglers. Now, folks in San Diego know that's not true. People live near the border.
And those people are in a constant state of surveillance.
And these towers can sometimes see up to like 7.5 miles. That is a lot of people's lives that they could pry into. And CBP really hasn't earned the trust of members of the community.
The sheer size and rugged terrain of the border make it nearly impossible to see the privacy concerns raised by this virtual border wall. But thanks to VR technology, we now have a better sense.
So what I have planned for you is we are going to go on a tour of a whole bunch of different locations from San Diego to Brownsville. So we'll do the whole border, and I'm going to show you a bunch of different technologies.
Our tour began right here in San Diego.
Okay, so we are going to start in some place that is fairly familiar to you. This is Friendship Park. And this is actually Friendship Park, I think, circa 2018 or something.
We covered hundreds of miles in mere seconds. Moss took me to...
So this is Naco, Arizona. So we are at Oregon Pipe, the entrance to Oregon Pipe National Monument in southern Arizona. But let me take you to Laredo, Texas, where we are now at a public park where people play soccer. This is in McAllen, Texas.
Customs and Border Protection says that these towers give agents in the field a significant leg up against criminal networks. They're an essential part of border security. And on this issue, there's agreement on both sides of the political aisle. In 2019, Democrats promoted the idea of virtual borders as a more humane alternative to former President Donald Trump's border wall. Here is San Diego Congressman Scott Peters describing the virtual wall.
It might be sensors and radar to spot moving people and objects in any weather or any time of day. It might be cameras mounted on drones to surveil places where the terrain is tough to monitor.
Peters did not respond to an interview request for this story. Despite the bipartisan support, experts say that these towers result in more migrant deaths. And they do nothing to prevent the most common method of drug smuggling, which is to simply drive through a legal border crossing. Sam Chambers is a researcher at the University of Arizona. He studies how border infrastructure contributes to migrant deaths.
People moving around out of sight of these towers means they're taking longer journeys.
And by taking longer journeys, they put themselves at risk of multiple health issues like
kidney damage or dehydration or a heat stroke are increased with this. So it's making the journey more dangerous and a greater risk of dying.
Chambers' research is only in Arizona right now, but he says that the new virtual map will help him study other parts of the border. Victor Clark Alfaro has been researching human and drug smuggling along the border since the late 1980s. He talks with human smugglers, known as coyotes, on a regular basis, and they tell him that the border towers are not stopping them.
Me dicen los coyotes que eso no ha sido ningún impedimento, que ellos continúan cruzando.
When it comes to drugs, the federal government's own data shows that most enter the US through legal border crossings. Clark Alfaro says that putting up surveillance towers in remote parts of the desert isn't going to stop that.
Sabemos que uno de los lugares donde más droga se cruza es el puerto de entrada de San Isidro a Estados Unidos. Bueno, ahí las torres no funcionan absolutamente para nada.
Clark Alfaro says it's really just a numbers game, and the numbers are stacked up against Customs and Border Protection, especially in San Isidro. Somewhere between 50 and 70,000 vehicles cross that port of entry every single day, and CBP agents only have the capacity to send a fraction of them to secondary inspection. Clark Alfaro says the volume is just too overwhelming.
Pero el volumen es enorme y eso representa una puerta de oportunidades.
Moss wants the virtual map that the Electronic Frontier Foundation created to lead to more informed policymaking on border enforcement.
Hopefully, by putting this map out there, people can evaluate and say, hey, I didn't know this was going in near my house. I didn't know this was going in near my ranch.
Or at the very least, let people know who's watching them. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.